An ancient word, Romans 5. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I have to be here where there's light. An ancient word, Romans 5, 3-5. And not only that, but we also boast in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint us, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that has been given to us. Now, the contemporary word, an observation by May Sarton. True gardeners cannot bear a glove between the sure touch and the tender root. Must let their hands grow knotted as they move with a rough sensitivity about under the earth, between the rock and shoot, never to bruise or wound the hidden fruit. And so I watched my mother's hands grow scarred. She who would heal the wounded plant or friend with the same vulnerable yet rigorous love. I minded to see her beauty gnarled, but now her truth is given me to live. And I learned for myself, we must be hard to move among the tender with an open hand, and to stay sensitive up to the end. Pay with some toughness for a gentle world.
Well, if it hasn't settled in for you yet, excuse me, if it hasn't settled in for you yet, yes, we are observing, in a sense, Mother's Day today. And I do agree that Mother's Day is not a traditional Christian holiday. And in fact, it didn't originate in the church at all. But it is a day that we are reminded of essential aspects of human life, and more than human life as well. I was just this past week watching on Netflix a video series, 4 parts, called Chimp Empire. Now, the title is all wrong because it's not about an empire, but it is about chimpanzees and their lives. And it is a really amazing, intimate portrait about the interrelationships among chimpanzees in a given community. And to watch the scenes of the mothers with their young infants and the times that they had to go to protect them, or the times they encouraged them to reach out on their own. It was a truly moving experience, and I could stop right there and tell you to go home and watch these programs, but I have a couple more things to say first. We talk about mothers in nature in other ways too. I'm thinking about Suzanne Simard, who's a scholar of trees, and who is one of the scholars who has identified the ways that trees and other organisms communicate underground. And she will call a central tree in a community of trees a mother tree. So this sense of what a mother is surrounds us, and it clearly doesn't only refer to human mothers. In fact, Anne Lamott, one of our wonderful local writers, wrote quite a diatribe. Well, that's maybe a little strong, but she posted her annual Mother's Day post only for those who dread the holiday, et cetera, and she just says why. She said, I didn't raise my son Sam to celebrate Mother's Day. I didn't want him to feel some obligation to buy me pricey lunches or flowers, some obligatory annual display of gratitude. In fact, she later says that she'd just as soon you pick some flowers out of her backyard and bring them to her. That would be the best. But she gives us several reasons why she's not big on Mother's Day. One, she says, is that somehow it seems to say that mothers are superior women. I never thought that myself, but perhaps even though she is a mother herself, she felt that before she was a mother. She says, there's an illusion that mothers are automatically more fulfilled and complete. I don't necessarily think that either, but I remember a story from my dear friend Jane, who, when she started a new job once, Jane was a person who just radiated gentle happiness. And her coworkers said, "You seem like just such a happy and content person. Are you married? Do you have children?" Because they assumed that in order to be so happy and content, that would be the state of Jane's life. And in fact, Jane did not have children. She had never married at that point in her life. And she did have a partner she lived in a little cottage and he lived in another little cottage about 100 yards away. So they had their own spaces, but they could get together when they wanted. That was Jane's idea of how to live for a long time. So she says, my main gripe about Mother's Day is that it feels incomplete and imprecise. The main thing that ever helped mothers was other people mothering them, including aunties and brothers. A chain of mothering that keeps mothering the whole shebang afloat. I'm the woman I grew to be, partly because of my mother, in spite of my mother, and partly because of the extraordinary love of her best friends and my own best friends' mothers, and from surrogates, many of whom were not women at all, many of them gay men. I have loved them my entire life, including my mom, even after their passing. She notes that while mothers are romanticized, sentimentalized, they're also blamed when a child gets into trouble, when someone as an adult becomes an unpleasant person. We think it must be all down to how they were mothered. So she doesn't want to celebrate mothers particularly on Mother's Day, at least not mothers who gave birth. And she says, I don't want any of these gifts unless you're going to give them to everyone who helped mother children. So there's a little bit of a contrarian there for our conversation. And Valerie Kaur, who is a California writer, she's a member of the Sikh faith, and she writes wonderful books about love and other topics. She says, perhaps agreeing with Lamott, mothering is a capacity that resides in each of us. It's not a biological destiny, nor can it be confined to a sphere of life. For love is sweet labor, fierce, necessary, and life-giving. Who do you mother? Who mothers you? How do you mother yourself? To love and be loved is our birthright. She comments on the dark mood of our country at times over the last few years, and she says, what if this darkness is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? What if our America is not dead, but a country still waiting to be born? Now, we started our service with a picture of Kathy Phibbs, a mountain climber from the Northwest. And she was perched on the edge of Mount St. Helens volcano, 1987, in a red chiffon dress and a white pillbox hat on her skis. She had skied to the top, of course. And it's an interesting thing to me to think about Kathy Phibbs because she wasn't a mother. And in fact, this skiing up the mountain on Mother's Day in dresses has become a tradition there, but it wasn't actually started out to be a Mother's Day celebration. Kathy was skiing up on Mother's Day with her friends because it was the last day, Mount St. Helens was open for skiing for the first time since the eruption of the volcano 7 years before. And it was the last day that you could ski up without buying a permit. And they were cheapskates. They didn't want to have to pay for a permit. So there's a lot of interesting things about Kathy Phibbs. She helped to organize and lead a women's climbing organization in Washington and Oregon, led many trips, and was a real encourager. She was someone who kind of mothered that organization into being and mothered those skiers and climbers into skiing and climbing. And people say back in those days, it was relatively uncommon to see groups of women doing significant climbs or adventures on their own with women leading. There was a lot of sexism in the climbing community. And one person, remembering Kathy, said, "We all had experience of being with men who would just take charge and go ahead and sort of try to take over for us. There was this assumption that we weren't strong enough, good enough, couldn't do it as well as they could. When a group of guys would see Phibbs and her friends in the backcountry, they'd ask, 'Are you ladies alone?' 'No,' they'd reply, 'we're with each other.'" So it hadn't originally been a Mother's Day celebration, but it has become a Mother's Day tradition. And by now, several 100,000 people have climbed that mountain, usually skied up it, on Mother's Day, in dresses, men and women. And it's become an outpouring of exuberance. And also because it happens on Mother's Day, it has become an expression of mothers and Mother's Day. There's a sad ending to the story of Phibbs because she died just 4 years later in a climbing accident, which was a great loss to the community, as well, of course, to herself and her family and her close friends. But she is well remembered for her own female energy, her own declaring that just because something is associated with women or not associated with women doesn't mean that we are confined to that or excluded from that. Another of my heroes, Heather Cox Richardson, who is a mother. I thought I had brought her little comments with me, and where are they? Left them on the printer, okay. So Heather Cox Richardson, just about every day, sends out an email, and she also posts it on Facebook. An email usually discussing the events of the day and their historical implications. She's an historian of especially 19th century American history, but very politically engaged. But yesterday she posted a story of one of her mentors, a woman who really helped to mother her, not her own mother, who she also greatly admired and appreciated, but a neighbor that she would go and work for, beginning when she was about 12 years old. And I regret that I didn't bring the paper with me because I could tell you her name. But this neighbor was a woman who was the oldest in a large family, and she had been required to stay home and take care of everything while her younger siblings eventually went off to school and to college and lead more out there lives. But this mentor of hers had decided never to have children, never to be a mother. And Heather Cox Richardson comments, little did she know that she did become a mother, because she mothered not only Heather, but many other young women in town into ways of being women, strong women. Now, I don't want to ignore birth mothers here. I wouldn't be here without one. And I think it is important that we honor our mothers, but not just on Mother's Day. It's a good opportunity. I understand there are lots of beautiful flowers in the shops, that there's specials at the cafes and so on. But I was thinking about a mentor of mine, Penelope Turton. And when I was 18 or so, I began working for her. She ran a small organic farm in eastern Massachusetts, where I grew up. And it was the first organic farm in Massachusetts, beginning in the 1950s. And I worked with her for summers for several years. And not only I worked with her, but almost every one of my sisters also eventually worked for her. And she became friends with my mother. And so she was part of our family in a certain way. When she was in her 70s, my sister Bernice was having a baby. And Penelope said, you know what? I have never seen a baby being born. Penelope was not a biological mother, and I won't go into that sad story. But Penelope said, I have never seen a baby being born, and I would just love to see a baby being born. May I be in the room when you have your baby? And so Penelope sat in a chair, not in the middle of things, but just being there as my nephew George was being born. And it was a highlight of her life, the sense of awe at childbirth. If any of you have had children, you have experienced that awe in a very deep bodily way. And for those of us who have not, it is an amazingly awesome process that a woman can nurture in her body for those 9 months or so, a new being, and bring that baby to birth. I've been reading a book about awe and how important awe is to our health, to our mental health, to our lives, to our communities. And there are many ways that we experience awe. We do experience awe in the face of all kinds of caregiving or all kinds of compassion for each other. Sometimes small awe, sometimes big awe, like childbirth. We experience awe at many other times as well. One of them is when we're in nature. Haven't we, probably each one of us, been walking along in the woods or a field and seen a huge tree or a tiny flower and just been transfixed, transformed, moved in our very being by that beauty, by that power, by that ecology of things. One of the ways that people experience awe and express awe is through communities of faith, many different religions. In fact, some people think that that's where religion came from, is people having experiences of awe, experiences of something larger than themselves that they couldn't fully explain with their day-to-day knowledge, something that moved them, that lifted them up, that held them up. And so I think that that's part of why we gather, because in gatherings where people join and sing together and pray together and listen together and even dance together, in these places we can begin to sense that awe of mutual expression. Dr. Keltner, the author of the book, calls it, oh dear, now the word ran right off my mind. Well, it might have had the word exuberant in it. It refers to the way that we feel. Now, the strongest times we might feel it would be if you're in a stadium and people are cheering for a sports team. You get that feeling of the roar, the alliance of the crowd. But it happens, of course, in many places. And music, too, will bring us awe. So I was thinking that perhaps important for us on Mother's Day might be to contemplate the awe of mothering, of the process of mothering, from giving birth to caretaking, to encouraging, to shaping, to perhaps even commenting when we go astray. That being a mother is not only for mothers and not only for women. I was thinking yesterday, we had a memorial service for Peter Hickes, and I thought about the ways people talked about the way he listened. When you had a conversation with him, he really listened to you. And his nephews said so, and so did other people agree, that this was part of Peter's greatest gift to us, was that capacity for listening. And I thought, Peter could have been a good mother. Maybe he was a good mother. And I think we can all be good mothers. And on Father's Day, I'll talk about fathers the same way. But it seems to me that in our attempts to honor mothers, we have come to narrow the idea of what a mother is and what a mother wants and needs. That a mother is the person who birthed us and she wants flowers and chocolate. She might want flowers and chocolate, but I think more than anything, our mothers, whether they be our biological mothers or our mentoring mothers or our momentary mothers, when they say, you caught your coat in your car door, the real thing that we have to bring to mothers is our own sense of awe at the capacity for compassion and for our own capacity to share our gratitude and give our honor to them. So I am in awe for those of you who did give birth. I am in awe for each one of us for the ways that we have mothered. And it is my hope that we may find better and better ways to mother during each time of our lives. Thank you, mothers. Amen. we will